I have made so many mistakes with my photography over the years, and today I'm going to share them with you thanks to Samsung, who is sponsoring this video. I've recently been using their new SD Pro Plus memory card, and we're gonna talk about this in a minute. So here's the thing. I've never taken any photography classes. Maybe I should have. Everything I've learned by doing it wrong first. And I think anybody who's ever gotten into photography has experienced going back and looking at their earlier stuff and screaming. There were some pretty severe photography sins that I used to commit that I feel like I've overcome, and I'm gonna talk about them today. And please let me know if you've done any of these as well. I never shot in RAW. I think this is probably the ultimate photographer's sin. People will judge you for it. And if you aren't familiar with what RAW is versus like JPEGs, RAW files are uncompressed. They're the highest quality that you can shoot in. They have a lot more data than other file types. They're also massive and will take up a lot of storage. But the reason that shooting RAW is so amazing is it gives you so much more flexibility in editing. I can shoot a RAW photo where the subject is almost completely dark, that you can't see any details about them, and I can completely recover the shadows in Lightroom. Now, the biggest reason I didn't like shooting in RAW is because my camera would freeze up when doing continuous shooting. I do a lot of that, and it was freezing up because I wasn't using fast enough memory cards. For years, I had no idea that this was the reason that that was happening. It was even happening when I was like just shooting my videos. You want to be shooting on a professional level memory card, which brings me to the Samsung SD Pro Plus. I'm just now realizing that I should have brought a towel along with this setup because now I've got water on my laptop a little bit. This is a new top-of-the-line memory card from Samsung that offers superior performance with super fast read and write speeds. It's going to handle your burst shooting, your 4K video recording, and this thing is built to last. As you've probably already gathered, it's waterproof for up to 72 hours in a meter depth of seawater. It's also temperature proof from -13 to 185 degrees Fahrenheit, which I was trying to think, where would you ever find your stuff in 185 degrees? Like, I was thinking, if you left a car in the desert, like in Death Valley with the windows up, would that get up to 185 degrees? It's shock proof, it's magnetic proof, it's wear out proof, it's x-ray proof, so when you run it through the scanner at the airport, it's not gonna mess with it. And it's drop proof up to 5 meters, which if you've dropped your card more than 5 meters, you've probably dropped it off a cliff, in which case you're not getting it back anyway. It's available in capacities ranging from 32 all the way up to 256 gigabytes, and there's an Evo Plus line available for hobbyists. Super reliable. Samsung makes really great flash memory products, and I will have a link down in the description to check this out. Over editing. To be fair, I think anyone who has ever had an Instagram account is guilty of this one. I mean, there was a time where we actually thought filters like Kelvin and X Pro looked good, and like bokeh hearts. Remember that, when like you could not post a photo without some like bokeh, some really fake bokeh accent on it? The tricky thing with editing is when you've stared at a photo for a really long time editing it, your calibration for what looks normal gets completely thrown off. All the time, I will spend like an hour editing a photo and I will think, wow, I have really perfected this. This looks great. And then I'll get up and walk away from the computer and do something else for a little bit, and when I come back, I'll look at the photo and be like, oh my god, what have I done? My skin will be just straight up orange, which when I was in the editing rabbit hole, I thought like, ooh, this looks really glowy. I look like I've been on vacation. When in reality, I just look like an Oompa Loompa. So now I have mandatory editing breaks. When I think I've finished editing an image, I have to take a break and come back later with different eyes just to confirm that it actually looks normal. I never backed up my photos or footage. This one gives me heart palpitations to think about. You guys, I would go on a week-long trip and shoot a ton of content, and I would not back up the card once. Not to my computer, not to an external drive. I would just leave the card in my camera. The thing that taught me my lesson here is last year when I did my trips to Charleston and Savannah. I have videos up for those trips as well. For whatever reason, I was going through my memory card with all of that trip stuff on it, and I was was deleting a few select things and I was doing the like bulk select option. And when I went to delete, it gave me the option to delete all, which I thought meant delete all that I have selected. It wiped the card. First, I panicked, and then I ended up spending a lot of money on expensive software to recover it. Never again. I am now so strict about backing up all of my stuff, especially when I'm traveling. To back everything up, I use these portable SSD drives, which I've talked about in several videos now, I think. These are from Samsung, and they are so tiny. They are like the size of a credit card, and the new T7 is even thinner than the T5, which is crazy, and it's also nearly twice as fast as the T5. And my favorite thing to do with these, I've shared this hack in a couple of videos, but in case you haven't seen it, it's a game changer. You get some adhesive Velcro, you put one side on here and one side on your laptop case, and you just stick it right on there. It eliminates the dangly cord situation, and it's amazing. I overexposed everything. When professional looking photos started becoming more popular on Instagram, I kept seeing these feeds that were so light and airy and beautiful, and I assumed the way to achieve that was just to crank up your exposure. But as it turns out, that's not usually how that's done. It's usually done in editing. So I ended up with all of these photos with like a completely white sky when you've overblown the highlights so much that you can't even tell. It could be cloudy, it could be a pink sunset. You have no idea what that sky looked like. I never used my histogram. I have learned that I should never trust my eyes in the viewfinder for exposing an image because it turns out I'm really bad at it. And if I had realized that sooner, it would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of reshoots over the years. If you aren't already using it, the histogram is this little wave graph tool that most cameras have that will tell you the light data for that image. So if your image is really, really bright and overexposed, you'll see the graph really spike at the lighter end, and vice versa. If your image is really, really dark, it'll spike at the dark end. And ideally, you want your wave to look fairly even. It's never going to be completely even, but you don't want it significantly spiking in one area. And it takes like 2 seconds to check your histogram, and it can save an entire shoot. Not shooting unless the conditions were ideal. I just want to live in a world where every sunrise and sunset is a perfect golden hour, but I'm continually finding that sometimes it's the imperfect conditions that create the coolest images. I went to Alaska last year, and it rains a lot in the inside passage of Alaska, but I ended up getting some really amazing foggy, rainy images and video that just wouldn't have been as cool if it had been perfectly sunny. Shooting at too wide of an aperture. I feel like this is a rite of passage for everybody with photography. At some point, you get your first wide aperture lens. Maybe it's an f2, a 1.4, a 1.2, and you're so blown away by the depth of field it can create that you just start shooting everything with the lens wide open no matter what. And for a long time, I did this to a fault because I really like a shallow depth of field. I would take photos where the eyes are in focus, but the nose is out of focus. And I just had this assumption that a shallower depth of field inherently made an image look higher quality, when a lot of times it actually distracted from the image. Sticking to the rules too much, specifically the rule of thirds, it says that an image should be divided with lines on all of the thirds, making a 9 square grid, and important elements should be placed along the lines or their intersections. And this is definitely a great rule for a lot of compositions, but I definitely used to use it too much, or I felt like that was the only composition to use. I always admire photographers who are good at breaking the rules and thinking outside of the box, because I think that's really how you get those once in a lifetime amazing shots, because they're not what the standard composition would be. Not utilizing dual card slots. A lot of cameras have 2 card slots with the purpose of shooting onto 2 cards simultaneously. The great thing about utilizing 2 card slots is you immediately have a backup of your images as you're shooting them, which for a lot of photographers, especially professional photographers, is essential. I've spoken to a lot of wedding photographers, and they've all said that they can only shoot on cameras with 2 card slots because they cannot risk shooting somebody's wedding and then having a card fail and not having those images. They need the backup as they're shooting. If both of the card slots are there, there's no reason not to use them both so that I can have peace of mind that I have a backup of my images the moment I shoot them. And I never used to do this, but like, especially if you accidentally wipe a card like I did. Like if I hadn't been able to recover the images from that Savannah trip, I would have never had that video to share with you guys. I've heard of cards failing, which, knock on wood, has never happened to me. If you're using a high quality memory card, it's incredibly unlikely that that would happen. Like with these Samsung cards, I've never had any of my Samsung memory products, like cards or hard drives, fail on me. I found them to be super reliable, and I'll have a link to these down below with this. But yeah, something I've learned is it never hurts to have copies of everything. Well, those are some of the photography mistakes I've made. Please share your mistakes down in a comment below because I would love to commiserate with you. Thanks for watching. I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.